Hi, I'm Madison from CPCAB, and today I'm here with Molly to talk about how to keep students engaged and motivated as they near the end of their courses. Hi, Molly.
Hi, Madison.
Can you offer any advice for tutors or ideas to keep their students engaged as they near the end of their courses?
Yeah, as you said, we've been listening to tutors through all our centres, and one of the things that was coming through loud and clear was the difficulty in really staying connected and engaged and keeping the students motivated as they start to think about the ending of their courses. And of course, during lockdown, that's brings new challenges and is more important than ever. So there's a number of things that tutors can do to really try and capture the energy of the training course and the students and help them to stay connected, or maybe even to re-engage if they've had periods of difficulty as they've been transitioning. I think one of the first things is really remembering the importance of the human touch. You know, in this remote world, everybody has been trying to stay in touch remotely, but also recognizing that at times it feels very distant. And so there's something about trying to reconnect again at that level. And counselling tutors have many, many interpersonal qualities and attitudes which are really vital actually at unsettling times. I'm talking about things like empathy, acceptance, compassion and transparency. So, your students are going to benefit from a sort of emotional holding. It's really, really important for them. So let them know you care about them. Let them know that you really understand the difficult circumstances that they are finding themselves in. That actually will go a long way. And you can do that through just email, telephone or video calls. So you might want to think about making time in a tutorial to see how your student's getting on, aside from the work that's going on, but just see how they're managing, and responding specifically to any particular difficulties that they might be having. And that might include signposting to other support services where that's appropriate. I would encourage tutors to really engage and facilitate discussions with their students about their experiences during this pandemic. Give them an opportunity to share their feelings. It's easy to feel like you have to just say I'm fine all the time, and often we're not fine. And tutors might also be able to post reaching out messages as well, just on a general, daily or weekly basis. All those things are going to help bring the sort of human touch and the connection back into the relationship. Another thing is that communication needs to be really, really clear for effective engagement. Otherwise, students might not necessarily understand quite what's required of them. And when we're not in the classroom anymore, or in the corridor, or having a cup of coffee, you can't really rely on the informal conversations that you would have had previously. So, I'm going to sort of suggest that tutors provide really clear guidance for their students. That might be about expectations around submission for a written work or any other tasks that they have. And that will provide a very clear framework for the students. So again, dates for submission, particularly all the information that CPCAB are providing. Make sure that your students have up-to-date information that's coming from us at CPCAB and what that means for them in their individual circumstances. You might also, be really clear in sharing your assessment and observation feedback as well. That all helps in the communication. So all of those things, although they're fairly standard things, to really make sure that they are part of your communication is going to help keep students engaged. And of course, you need to keep them engaged as well. So there's one thing getting them engaged, and some may have lost some of that. but you're all working really, really hard and learning probably a lot of new skills as you're adapting to remote teaching and learning. I would say try and prioritise the tasks that you have and share the work wherever possible. A lot of our students will have skills that we don't have, and we might be able to learn from them. So perhaps encourage your students to take on some new tasks, but remember, just try and minimise the burden for everybody. The less onerous it is, the more engaged students will be. So students might be able to engage in organising online meetings, giving each other peer feedback, perhaps working together on various tasks, perhaps a presentation or some other task. They might want to share some things that they've been reading about, or some research findings, or things that they're seeing on social media, and maybe even organising some sort of fun activity. It doesn't have to be all to do with the work.
I really like what you said about the human touch as well, because that's so important, and something that is quite difficult to maintain when we're doing things virtually and remotely. Engagement goes hand in hand with motivation, and I'm guessing that probably a lot of students are feeling a little bit unmotivated in the current situation, as a lot of people are, and as their courses near completion. So I was just wondering if you had any suggestions really about ways in which tutors can motivate their students.
Yeah, there's lots of ways that you can actually motivate students. Obviously, understanding some of their barriers is helpful, but as a broad brush, it's really important that students feel part of the learning group. And so you can do lots of things to help them feel part of that group. And one of the things is really keeping them up to date with regular updates and news. And that might be news from your centre, news about things that are happening in the local area or in the profession. Those sorts of things can easily be communicated, again, via email or other platforms like Facebook or WhatsApp or any platform really. So once again, I would always say, make sure your students have news from CPCAB, because we're working really hard to make sure that all the arrangements for completion of courses have the student at the centre of that. All the work that's been done around that is primarily to ensure that students can complete their courses. So make sure they're fully up to date with those sorts of things. Make sure they know about arrangements for completing their portfolios. That's quite an uncertain area at the moment. How are students going to finish off those portfolios, and how will they get their certificates when they have completed? And you might want to start thinking about your plans for an ending of the course. Many of you will have had planned endings which would have involved getting together and celebrating in some way. And we will be providing some more information and ideas about that in another video. But start thinking about the ending now, and perhaps get your students involved with that. You might also want to include professional news and updates, items about mental health and that sort of thing during this sort of pandemic. So really just keep up to date with them all the time. Another way that you can really motivate students is to really take a leading role. Communicate your flexibility and a differentiated response to all your individual students. They're all going to be in different circumstances, and they'll be balancing personal, work commitments and many other additional challenges as well. So really try and adapt what you're doing to meet their needs. Again, we're coming back to being clear about your expectations, but let your students know that you support them and that you'll provide everything that you possibly can in terms of the resources that are available to them. So you might want to put in some different activities, some varied activities, so that they can reach their learning outcomes in different ways. Smart learning outcomes are really important because they help all students to achieve. And signposting is always a really great idea for additional resources. There's all sorts of professional articles, self-care techniques, reading or other viewings that students can be helped with. So all of those things create the context of you leading and supporting your students in their group. And to keep everybody motivated, really, try mixing it up. So, you know, at the moment we're having a Zoom discussion, but there's many other different mediums that you can use. And different students will prefer different things. So it might be video conferencing platforms. You might take advantage of shared screens if there's a group of people. But there's lots of other ways that you can mix and match. So, for example, if you're in a video call, you might want to hold an image or something up to the screen, you know, completely non-technical to share things. You might want to use social media. A lot of centres send postcards and things to their students anyway around other information. So letters and postcards can be a way of keeping in touch. And also, you know, the good old telephone is still a great way to have a conversation.
Thank you for that. There's some really nice things in there. Completing your counselling qualification in the middle of a pandemic is far from an ideal situation, but I think what you've offered is really valuable. And have you got any tips to pass on to students to help them get the most out of their training experience?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that tutors can do to encourage their students to really pause and reflect on this experience, which has been like no other, I think, probably in the history of counselling training. And of course, it's brought many difficulties with it, but it's also brought some opportunities and some really significant and valuable learnings. So I would encourage tutors to encourage their students, to encourage every single student in their group to take at least one active role in some sort of interaction with others in the group. That can really help the group maintain their identity and their sense of unity. Maybe each student could come up with an idea, or just some students could come up with some ideas. They might like to find a buddy for some general support and encouragement. They might take turns in posting ideas for the week or each day. Finding new ways to give peer feedback, which will be really helpful for testimony evidence actually for their portfolios. And providing various other support for written work. Students can really support each other, and that's going to be really helpful to keep students engaged and motivated, because they're not just doing it for themselves, they're doing it for others in the group as well. I would also encourage you to encourage your students to really keep in touch with you. We know from some tutors that some students, perhaps who are struggling with technology or other challenges at home, have been very, not absent, but absent in as much as not vocal and not participating. So it would be useful to try and engage students in taking some ownership of their own progression. So in a way, it's sort of an over-communication, but keeping up to date, keeping on track, sharing how they're getting on with their candidate learning record, for example. You might use some sort of shared cloud type space for that, but really keeping in touch. And if you're not hearing from your students, try one of the other ways that we've suggested to try and bring them back into the group. And that might mean something like an initial reaching out call to see how they're doing. I'd also encourage you to try and bring some fun into this experience. You know, courses are coming to an end. It won't last forever. It's been really difficult. It's been worrying, and for many people, it's been devastating. So where it's appropriate, try and have some fun with your students. There's all sorts of things that most of you will be aware of that's out there. You know, it could be interactive quizzes, daily photo shares, different challenges, anything really that your students would like to engage in to help them to bring a bit of fun and some lightness into this experience. Remind them to keep in touch with each other. So sometimes relationships form in counselling groups and they might become more challenging at these times. So just encourage them to arrange perhaps informal meetups, coffee breaks, or any way really that they can keep those really important relationships alive.
We're hearing a lot about self-care in the news and on social media and how that benefits our studies or working from home. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on self-care for counselling students.
Yeah, I do. I think a lot of the news that we're hearing and a lot of the advice that we're hearing is very relevant. And it's, in a way, it's a bit of a pick and mix, isn't it? The things that might work for you. But I would encourage tutors to talk about self-care with their students, and not, absolutely at this time, really, more than ever. Tutors will have their own ideas. And some of the things that we know can be really helpful for counselling students, particularly when they're sort of locked down at home, is keeping that sort of energy level going, staying active in some way. So encouraging students to do a bit of exercise if that's something they're able to do. You might be able to set a challenge to make it fun. Students might think about whether they're able to have a socially distancing walk or doing some shared exercise. These are all things that really just actually help bring students back to their studies. So it gets the blood circulating, and then they can return, because there's nothing worse than sort of staring at a screen, writing an essay or something, or involved in a group meeting for hours upon hours. You might even be able to get some activities into your classroom. Oh, let's all, stand up and run on the spot for 2 minutes or something. But being active is a really, really helpful way to keep the energy levels in training going. One of the other things that counselling students will be developing their capacity and ability for is reflection and being able to listen to themselves, being able to pause and to be silent. One of the practices that's really helpful in developing those skills is meditation. And we know from all sorts of research that meditation is really, really beneficial as well to help with anxiety and just to generally quieten down the mind. So I certainly would encourage students to spend even a few minutes meditating every day. You might be able to start one of your classes or a particular session with a couple of minutes of silence, and that can really help students just get centered and engaged. And another thing, perhaps finally, just to say is, although for many, many of us, these have been very, very difficult times, have been personal challenges that we could never have anticipated, really, there's something about trying to identify what you're grateful for. And I would encourage tutors to ask their students to think about that. We know that practicing gratitude releases dopamine and serotonin, which are really, really important for your brain functioning. That's going to help you in your development, not only as a counsellor, but just generally. So again, that could be a task that's set by a tutor to ask students to think about something that they are actually grateful for. And that might apply to the training group, that can help bring the training group together, or it might apply to other aspects of their home life. So again, there are many, many different ways that students can look after themselves, and of course tutors. But I think the message that we're really trying to give to you is that it's important to keep that on the agenda. Don't forget about self-care.
That's great, thank you. I think you've covered some really useful points there, and I really hope that tutors can just take, even if it's just one thing that they take away from that, that would be great. So thank you very much, Molly.
Thank you, Madison.